Hi everyone, so this is some objections to utilitarianism. So your book only focuses on really just one objection to act utilitarianism. Kind of two. But really it's just this one that we're looking at here. There's a lot more objections to utilitarianism than just this one objection, so if you want to know them and sort of get a better idea of what utilitarianism is trying to say and what are some problems with it, I'm happy to talk to you about them individually. But let's focus on the one objection that your book gives. So, one problem with act utilitarianism is that it has this result where unjust actions turn out to be right. What does this mean? The idea is just that, well, if you're acting unjustly, you're acting immorally. If you're not acting immorally, then you're not acting rightly. So you'd think that unjust actions are sort of cases where it's paradigmatically the case that those are wrong actions. Paradigmatically just sort of means like they're a perfect example of like an immoral action, right? So when I say something's paradigmatically immoral, that's kind of what I mean. So think about, so slavery you might think is unjust, okay? The fact that it's unjust would mean it's immoral. Okay, so what are some cases where utilitarianism is going to say that certain unjust things actually turn out to be right? Well, for one, utilitarianism might actually say that slavery is okay in certain circumstances. Why? Because if the other options available don't produce the most overall amount of utility, then you ought to have slaves, if having slaves were to produce the most overall amount of utility. How might that work? How might that make sense? You might think, wait a second, isn't utilitarianism impartial? Shouldn't we be taking into consideration the happiness of the people who are being enslaved? Yes, you should. But utilitarians are also going to say that the people who are benefiting from slavery, their happiness needs to be taken into account as well, right? So if having free labor and the goods that are produced by that free labor produce way more happiness than not having the free labor, then utilitarians would just say slavery is okay. But slavery is obviously unjust, and that seems like a problem if utilitarianism could, in some circumstances, say that slavery is okay. There's other cases too. So here's a fictitious case, but also gets across the same sort of idea. And this really sort of gets down to the consequentialist idea of utilitarianism, although all the things we've talked about utilitarianism is really consequentialist anyway, because it's a consequentialist theory. Never mind that. So suppose hypothetically, you walk into a hospital. Okay, so you walk into a hospital, and you have you're kind of under the weather, you're like a little sick, you're a little worried about it, but like it's not that big of a deal, right? Maybe you have like a scratchy throat. Never mind the coronavirus stuff right now. Let's just talk about like you just have like a scratchy throat, whatever. You're kind of under the weather. You feel like you should go to the hospital, but you're not terribly concerned with it. Okay, so you walk in the hospital and you tell the person at the desk how you're feeling. Okay, so that's going on, right? And the doctor comes to see you, and the doctor's checking you out, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, it's not actually too bad. You might just have a really bad case of strep throat or something like that, or whatever. Okay. Now, suppose that also in the hospital are 5 people who are in dire need of various organs. So one of them needs, a pair of lungs, one of them needs a new heart, one of them needs a new set of kidneys. Okay, both the kidneys failed, and so on. All right, so 5 people are in need of organs. They're all different. And it just so happens that you have a perfect match for all of those people. So you have just the right kind of heart for that one person, just the right kind of lungs, and so on and so forth. And they're gonna die really soon unless they have a heart, some lungs, and so on and so forth to give them. Now, they don't have any. But it just so happens that somebody walked in, you in this case, you just so happen to walk in the hospital at a perfect time. And the perfect time is that those people really need those organs, and you have them. And so, the doctor has a choice actually here, right? The doctor could abduct you, kill you, harvest your organs, take those organs, and save 5 people's lives. Or he can let you go, and those 5 people are gonna die. Now, suppose there's no other way of getting these organs. It's the only way to get them, okay? And don't even try to worry about the legalities here. There's a thing in your book about legalities and morality that they're 2 totally different things. We're not talking about legalities when we're talking about morality. It gets really sort of tempting to try to talk about legalities, but just don't worry about it, okay? We're not focused on that. And if you want more information on why we shouldn't be focused on that right now, look at your book, or you can email me individually. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Okay, I'm just trying to keep this video as concise as I can right now. Okay. I'm not saying break the law. I'm just saying we're not talking about legality when we're talking about ethics. Okay. So anyway, so back to this case. So he has a choice: either let you go and those 5 people die, or he can kill you, harvest your organs, and save 5 people. Well, if I'm a utilitarian, all that matters is I produce the most overall amount of well-being. Okay. Now, saving 5 lives sounds like it's going to produce way more well-being than letting you go. So, strictly speaking, if I'm a utilitarian, it sounds like I should say that in that doctor's case where those are the only 2 options, he should kill you and harvest your organs. That sounds insanely unjust and immoral, okay? But utilitarianism would have the consequence of saying that that's okay. And that seems wrong. All right, so as a result, you can keep going on and on with cases just like that, okay? Unjust conviction, slavery, those sort of weird abduction kind of cases. And you think, well, if utilitarianism is going to say those are okay, then that's a reason to think utilitarianism is wrong, because our moral theory shouldn't be saying those are okay, all right? So that's one objection to utilitarianism. Again, you think of multiple kinds of objections about what things that could be unjust that utilitarianism also would actually just say is okay. So that's act utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism, there's really one main objection here to rule utilitarianism. Because here's the thing with rule utilitarians, right? So think back to the doctor case I gave you. What's a rule utilitarian going to say in response to that? They're just going to say, well, hey, actually, that's immoral. And they can say it's immoral. And the reason why is because they would say, well, we have a general rule against killing innocent people. Okay, right? That seems like a rule that they would accept at least, okay? And you'd be an innocent person in that case. And so because they're focused on conforming to rules, they're going to say, you shouldn't be killing that person, okay? That seems like the right result, all right? We want that from a moral theory, okay? Not to kill innocent people for no good reason, all right? So, rule utilitarians would avoid that. But there's a really big fundamental problem with rule utilitarians, which is really just, why not just be an act utilitarian? You might think, well, wait. Didn't we just say that they still have a problem that act utilitarians have? Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Why be a utilitarian to begin with? So let's just start there. Why should I be a utilitarian? Why do I want to be a utilitarian? If you like utilitarianism, you probably like the idea that all that matters really at the end of the day in terms of our moral deliberations is trying to figure out what produces the most overall amount of well-being or happiness. We're focused on the consequence of things, right? You're going to buy into the principle of utility. You're going to like the principle of utility, okay? So your rationale for accepting utilitarianism is a concern about the consequences of your actions and following the principle of utility, okay? And the main thing there that's worth pointing out and focusing on is the consequences thing, right? It's the consequences that matter. It's not rules, it's the consequences, it's the good or bad things you're getting from your actions, okay? That's what you care about if you're a utilitarian. But here's the problem. Rule utilitarians don't, strictly speaking, care about the consequences of your action. They care about following the rules, right? They care about following a rule that if everyone were to follow it, it may have good consequences. But you're going to get cases where you're going to follow rules and you're not producing the most overall amount of happiness out of them, right? And you might think the doctor case I gave you, that's okay because we don't think we should be killing innocent people. But think about, suppose a rule utilitarian would say, as a general rule, you shouldn't lie to your friends, for instance, okay? That seems like a thing where if people generally followed that rule, that would produce a greater overall amount of well-being out of all the options available for everyone involved, okay? So that's a rule. So let's just say as a rule, you should be truthful with your friends, okay? But there's plenty of cases where being truthful with your friends is going to actually hurt their feelings and probably make things worse off than they otherwise would be, okay? You might think of cases where you might have learned a secret about your friend, right? And maybe it's like a really embarrassing secret that they didn't want you to know about, all right? And they ask you, oh, did you hear about whatever the secret is? Or not the secret, but did you ever hear about what, whoever told you about this secret, right? So maybe they like a suspicion, like, oh, maybe the friend of your friend, like, was going to tell you this thing, embarrassing thing about them, okay? And they're like, oh, did so-and-so tell you about this thing about me? If you say yes, they're going to know right away that that you heard this embarrassing thing about them. If you say no, then they're not going to think the better if they're going to believe you, okay? So, option one is to tell the truth and say, oh yeah, so-and-so told me this embarrassing thing about you, and now I know it, and now you're going to be embarrassed and hurt as a result of me knowing it, okay? So that's me telling the truth. Option two might be, I'm just going to lie say I don't know about it, and their feelings are gonna be spared. And suppose I don't think any worse of them, maybe it's just like a really embarrassing story, something dumb that they did one night, okay? So it's really embarrassing, but like, it's not like I'm gonna like blackmail them, it's not gonna hurt them in the future. It's just something I know, and it's gonna hurt them to know that I know, okay? I'm sure maybe you can fill in the blanks with some examples of maybe things that maybe your friends have done or something like that. Okay, now, so if I'm a real utilitarian, I'm gonna say, well, tell the truth, because typically that's the right thing to do, because it's gonna produce the most overall amount of utility. But in that particular case, it wouldn't produce the most overall amount of utility. It's going to produce less utility out of all options available. Okay. So, if rule utilitarian is going to tell me to tell the truth, and I suppose I ask why. Like, well, why should I, right? If I like the principle of utility, why not just lie in this case, right? If all I care about is consequences, then I should lie, right? And they're going to say, no, follow the rule, because generally it's a good rule to follow. And then you might say, well, why should I follow the rule if it only generally works? Like, maybe I should generally follow it. Shouldn't I also sometimes break it if it means following the principle of utility? Because if all I really care about is the principle of utility, and that seems what utilitarians are cared about, then why not just break the rule sometimes, okay? Now you might think, okay, well, wait a minute, fine. So maybe I'm a real utilitarian, and maybe you like change it a little bit, right? So maybe you say like, okay, I get it, right? I get what Mr. Lenzel's getting at, right? So maybe I say, all right, well, I'm going to be a real utilitarian who says, in general, follow the rules, but break them when it means producing the most overall amount of utility, okay? Who's the problem with that, though? If you say that, then you're just basically an act utilitarian now. Because now all you're saying is, okay, follow the rule when it produces the most amount of utility when it doesn't break it. Which would just mean produce the most overall amount of utility, which is what act utilitarians are saying. So really now you're just stuck in this point where you might as well just be an act utilitarian if you're a real utilitarian, okay? And that's a really awkward place to be in, okay? So those are some objections to both forms of utilitarianism. The next theory we're going to look at is Kantian ethics.